So I'm starting now. We'd like to thank the South Carolina Middle Grades Initiative. They have been our loyal sponsors for several years, and we owe them a lot. And we're very great. They've been very gracious, and we're very grateful for all the support they've given us. I'd also like you all to visit our website, literacy612.org. Look for us on Facebook. We always have blogs going on, and the blogs, and we load the webinars into Facebook. They all point back to our website, where you can look back in the archives and see what we have had for webinars and blogs over the last 4 to 5 years, I think it is. So with that taken care of, if there's no other questions or comments, I would like to ask the first question of our panelists. Could you walk us through one formative or performance-based assessment that you've used that really reveals student thinking and learning? We are concerned with right or wrong, but we're really most concerned in disciplinary literacy with the thinking that goes on to arrive at their answers. What did the students do, and what did you learn from it? Y'all can fight over who wants to go first.
I'm going to defer in the classroom things to Mary and Terry first, and I will answer last because I am not teaching a class.
Okay.
Hey, I can go first. All right.
Yay.
So I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. Let's get a tab. Okay. All right, guys, good afternoon. I am, like Dr. Littlejohn said, Social Studies Department Chair, and one of the formative assessments that I'm going to be sharing with you is a CER response, that's claim, evidence, and reasoning, that I have incorporated this year into the classroom that has been very beneficial in helping seeing how students think and how they process their learning. So for this assessment, the goal was to discover if your representatives are representing your voice. So before this, students were able to discover their voice about certain political topics. We learned about political parties, things like that. And so now we were learning about our own current representatives. And so the text we use are primary sources, voting records, and senators' websites. Some of the voting records also had links to secondary sources, but we primarily focus on primary sources. And our task was to grade our senator. And then for the form of assessment, it was writing that CER response, does your representative represent your voice? And so some of the learning outcomes was to use data from the primary sources to make informed opinions, interpret data to draw conclusions about their representatives, and then to construct a response answering that compelling question, explaining their representative's grade, but justifying it using evidence. And so here's just a kind of the process. Step one, getting information from the representatives' websites. Step two, gathering data in their chart for voting records and voting data. And step three was the drawing conclusions, actually grading their representatives. And some of the things, I know it's kind of hard to see, some of the topics include they got to give them a grade on their ideology, primary bill sponsors, issue areas, percent of missed votes, laws they supported, opposed. And this was an extension that I'm hoping to do that I really think can help even take this to the next level, is having students communicate more before they start writing. And so doing a think, bear, share, like a parent-teacher conference with some engaging questions. And so here's some below that students, they pair it up, they pretend that they're the parent of or part of the parent of the senator or representative they chose, and asking these questions of the person, the teacher who gave them their grade. And the form of assessment is the exit ticket. Does your representative represent your voice? And the evidence focus area is using their grade and topic areas from the report card to really assess if students are able to make those connections, how they're able to draw conclusions and support it with evidence was the main thing that we were looking for in this. That's like, oh yes, I support them because they said that they care about health. They have to really kind of dig in and then use the evidence, be like, okay, on their website, they say they supported health. What do their voting records show? So looking at more of that in-depth knowledge and being able to have those historical thinking skills in there. And so I'll stop sharing my screen about that. And one of the things I learned,
Can I ask a question? What grade level is that generally?
this is upperclassmen 11th and 12th.
That's great. I see that as a way to get them really looking at their responsibilities for voting. You know, they're just a couple of years away from that. And if you're giving them those skills now to vet their candidates, I commend you. Just had to jump in.
Thank you so much. And sorry, I didn't know how much time I had, but I guess the last thing is what I really wanted the students to learn is to be able to be civically engaged, to make those informed decisions, not just in the assignment in the classroom, but translate that, transcending the classroom into them when they're able to vote, deciding on who I should support and being able to practice using data and working through their thought process. And the writing response in the CR allows me to see if their thinking is matching what they're saying, if they're supporting or not supporting. Is it actually justifying their answer, and being able to have those discussions?
I was just pausing to see if there are any questions for Mary before I jump into math. Any questions?
I think that back to what you were saying a minute ago, that okay, I remember, remember I'm really old, but I remember when I turned 18 and was eligible to vote, it seemed like I didn't trust my own instincts because I just felt like other people are smarter than I am. So, I'll just let you guys narrow it down to two, and then I'll, because obviously you know more than I do. And I think in giving your students these skills and the ability to discern what is, are their words lining up with their voting, right? Which, I was never taught that when I was younger. And we didn't really, quite honestly, have access unless it was in the newspaper. That's how old I am, to know what their voting record was. So what would happen in Iowa, where I'm from, is, about July, August of, the year, once they would put out like, this is the party, this is what they're saying, this is their voting record. And but then again, you still get overwhelmed by the language, right? So they voted for this law and that law. So one of the things is we have to teach our students to know what that means and to figure out like why that matters, and more importantly, how does that impact them. And I think that's kind of the missing piece too, is we don't make it clear that if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. And then what happens when you don't have a voice? So, yeah, that's all I'm going to add.
I was gonna.
Thank you.
I wanted to add
Go ahead.
on to that. So I teach statistics, and this week one of our graphs of the day was about the distribution of kind of not I guess political parties among the different generations. So we had a graph that showed the percentage of people who say they're Republicans, say they're Democrats, say they're independent, based on all the different generations, starting with the silent generation all the way through Gen Z. And we had a lot of discussion about the same thing, about what it's like to vote, what the ballot looks like, all of those things that they don't really realize. So I think it's important. That's an important assessment that you're doing, Mary, to help them understand how to be part of our community in the United States.
All right, thank you guys for your responses. And there's definitely a passion for civic engagement. So I think with disciplinary literacy, that can really help be incorporated into the classroom to even increase that engagement even more. But that is it for me for social studies. So if Miss Rathburn would like to take over for math.
Of course. So let me see if I can find my content. All right. So thinking about math and disciplinary literacy in math, I think a lot of times when we think of literacy, we think of words and reading, and in mathematics, it looks a little bit different sometimes. So I tried to think about what is specifically different about disciplinary literacy in mathematics. In math, we try to help students translate between the math language and the English language, that context. We try to help them make sense of work and produce work that makes sense, and then also connecting representation. So my assessment that I brought to share is one on connecting representation. So this is an Algebra 2 assessment, formative assessment. It comes from a source called New Visions for Public Schools, which is a curriculum. And the way this assessment works is, I know there's not a lot of words on there, just a lot of mathematical language, is the responsibility of the student is to match the equations with the graphs, which ones are saying the same thing. So in mathematics, Mary and I actually talked about it earlier this week, and she helped me decide which assessment to share. And I told her, I said, you know, when we're being mathematicians, we have to be able to read equations correctly and know what they're saying. So for example, that very first one, y equals x squared plus 2x minus 1, versus the one below it, y equals the quantity x plus 1 squared minus 2, and being precise with that language when we're reading those mathematical symbols and using the appropriate conventions. So this was my assessment. It's just a little mini 20-minute formative assessment for students to see how they're connecting the equations and the graphs, because a big part of mathematics literacy is being able to look at different representations of ideas, words, graphs, numbers, and equations, and see the connections between them. So I took a little bit different approach. I brought some student work to show you how my students approached this and responded to this. So here is the response from one of my students. I'll give you a chance to read it. I know you're not math people except for Stephanie. Stephanie might be like, oh, yay. And so what I see in this student response is I can see that she understands the influence of that negative on the graph, which is great. And then also that she understands how the part in the parentheses is affected in the graph too, with the reflection. So, and I know that goes into our second question, so I'm sorry, I can stop if you want me to.
No, I would say go ahead and just complete it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way this happens in the classroom though is they work with a partner to, so there are 3 sets of equations, only 2 graphs. So there's more equations than there are graphs. They work with their partner to make their matches. And then one pair comes and offers an argument of which ones they think fit together. The rest of the class are the skeptics that ask questions and try to find the holes in their argument. So we're making those mathematical arguments in front of each other, in front of our peers, talking to each other about math, trying to show that math beyond just the writing. So the writing is for me to see what they know, but the discussion is also to help us all as a class kind of build together our mathematical knowledge. Here's another pair of students, and I chose this one because I think it's important. The first one, the reasoning is correct, right? The reason that they chose 3 and 1 as the 2 matching graphs, they talk about the y-intercept, so they bring that math language in there, although I'd like to see a little bit more math language. But the second one has the correct matches, but flawed reasoning. And so to me, that's why it's so important to embed disciplinary literacy into our assessments, is it gives us more insight into what the students are thinking and lets us know when their thinking is maybe on the wrong path versus just getting the right answer and maybe getting it in a way that doesn't make sense. So that's what I have.
Comments for Terry, questions?
When I'm teaching disciplinary literacy to undergrads, they really struggle with math. Science, I can win them over pretty quickly because you have mentors, right? We have articles, we have, the FET website where they can watch things and fill out the reports. But math, consistently, they come back and they go, I don't see how this works for me. I don't see how this works for me. And I tell them, okay, but well, if a student comes in your class and they don't know the vocabulary, the disciplinary language, right? When you teach them, they feel like disciplinary insiders. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, math makes my brain collapse. Okay, so when I was working on my PhD, I was determined to understand statistics and linear regressions. I'm like, you got numbers, you got letters, and then you throw Greek letters. Work, right? So I think a big part of it is upfront teaching explicitly the vocabulary and then expecting them to use it. So for instance, when I was teaching English language arts, then when I would introduce a unit, so novels or short stories or fiction, right? So you don't have a person, you have a character. So I would teach them the vocabulary, and then they couldn't, if they said, well, this dude, nope, what do I need to hear? This character, right? So then getting them in the practice of hearing it and using it and knowing it's required. And I think sometimes that can scaffold or help while they're getting more comfortable with what we're asking them to do. I'm just saying. But the big one I always recommend for using writing in a math class is writing down the steps and then having someone do the equation or whatever, only using the steps on that page. And then they see where their gaps are and what they're not including. And I think that sometimes we learn more from what isn't there than what we think is. So on that note.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think those content literacy strategies, like the word banks, like the sentence stems, like the sentence frames, support them in learning how those disciplinary vocabulary words go together. And
Yep.
so we put those two types of strategies together to help our students become those apprentice mathematicians. I teach statistics and algebra. So I tell my statistics students all the time, your job is, we are the statisticians, right? We understand the statistics. Our job is to communicate statistics to people who don't understand statistics.
Right.
Same thing with mathematics. Our job is to communicate mathematics because we're mathematicians. Communicate this to people who may not understand the mathematics. And so we're working on that all the time, as well as making sense of the mathematics ourselves. And I like what you said about the writing out the steps. I do a lot of looking at worked examples and annotating the steps, but I haven't tried going that other way. So I think that would be a nice addition to my practice for sure.
Well, when we think about it, okay, so one of the things I did for nonfiction writing was I said, write down how to make a peanut butter sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they did. And then I would just model what they said. I'm like, bread from where? Which end? How do I open it? Which side do I use? Like, they realized all the information they didn't put in there. And they would refer to that often throughout the semester. It's like, guys, he's like, when we did the peanut butter sandwich, we left all sorts of stuff out. I mean, you know what I mean? But you don't know that till you actually try to implement what you did, right? And but that's when they saw the flaw in there, right? They thought it was complete until they tried to do what was on there. So I think sometimes that's empowering for students. And like when I would learn vocabulary, sometimes if I couldn't get it, if I knew what it wasn't, then I could make more sense of it. Which again, ADHD girl, but you tell me that malevolent means harmful. Okay, but what isn't, right? What isn't malevolent? Not taking, not doing whatever is malevolent. So anyway, sometimes the opposite can help reach us when the straightforward doesn't. And we also have to remember, everybody gets intimidated by topics like math and science. English, not so much, because everybody reads and everybody likes to talk about stories. But you science and math people, you're intimidating us. Just saying.
So
Well,
I'd like
as
to
science and
share.
math people might be intimidated by the English people, though.
Yeah, that's true. I'd like to share something I observed in a student I was tutoring, and I just gave a shout out to the teacher that did it because she was so amazing. She would give them back their tests and tell them if they could explain their error and reconstruct it correctly using words as well, they would get half credit back. And I thought that was so amazing because the kids just think they're getting their test grade raised, but she's reinforcing the learning so that they will have it for the next whatever they have to use it on, because in math everything builds. It's not like you just show it on the test and then you're done with it. You have to know it to keep going. And so I don't know if you've ever done that, Terry, but I just think that was an amazing insight to me about how disciplinary literacy can reward a student.
Yeah, we do test corrections, and actually every Friday I choose a mistake from the week and we analyze it together and talk about what kind of mistake it was, whether it was a careless mistake or a calculation mistake or a conceptual mistake or a problem-solving mistake, and then they have to correct that together. But that's also what they do for their test corrections.
That's amazing. That's amazing to me. Any other comments on math? Or Maggie, it looks like you've got something. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I wish I could be more opaque, but I can't. Um, okay, again, math makes my brain hurt, so just work with me here. Do we go over and give them examples of the different things you just said, the theoretical, right, so that they can see? Because those are just words to me. But if you showed me what that looked like and how it was supposed to be done, kind of that, and I think that's why CER is so effective, because you've got the sentence and the paragraph frames, and it helps them organize their thinking. But sometimes we need to show our students what we're talking about. We assume they know, and not so much. And one of the things back to ELA, which I'm familiar with, when I show them a paragraph over something, a response paragraph over, how you restate, like the races or aces, then the other thing I do is show them one that isn't good, right? And I say, now let's look at this one and let's look at this one together. Which one makes the most sense, and which one tells me that you understand what's going on? And then they unpack it, and that has been really helpful. But that's all I can say about math.
I was just going to say on Terry's thing, I have at times have asked them, instead of like actually working the problem out, of making it like, well, if I was going to take this to Dr. Littlejohn, would she be able to follow your steps and actually solve the problem? And so they actually are solving it, but also having to tell me how to do it. Like they are the teacher. Like, how are you going to explain to me how to do it? And of course, when Flipgrid was a thing, like I would make them actually do a video and actually show it. But like I've had them actually write it out of like, just talk me through it. So whoever I went to hand, could they follow your steps and get the answer and do it that way?
Yeah, I think
Anything else on math?
If you can explain it to someone else, then you can see, do I really own it, or do I get hung up somewhere? And so that's fabulous. I often wear my hat thinking about, see the invisible one, for the students for whom English is not the first language, math is a bear. It really is, especially if that language, their first language, is not Latin based, then almost everything they see is new and they have to connect it somehow. So what I've started doing, and I'm not teaching math literacy right now, but what I've seen my undergraduate students, stuff clicks for them when they get to do puzzle work. Like when they have to puzzle something together that matches and then talk out why this is the correct match. So I could see that for math as well. And then if you have the sentence frames for the English language learners that are simple enough to just stay with that, and the others can handle more complex ones, but at least they get one way to walk themselves through this and learn the language and hear themselves. So when they then have to write, it's not so foreign because they've heard themselves say it out loud in pair work and so forth. So I love this. You're taking some of my math fear away. Thank you, Terry.
I think that's are you familiar, how do you say your name?
Elke.
Elka, are you familiar with the book, The Problem with Math is English?
I'm not, but yeah, I will look
It
it up.
is one of my favorite books, and it is about how sometimes the language that we use, the lack of clarity in our language in our math classes. I'm sorry, this is turning into a math webinar, but the lack of clarity in the language that we use as math teachers causes confusion for our language learners. And it's a fascinating book. It may be out of print, but if you can find it, I encourage you to check it out.
I'll look.
The Problem with Math is English, and it's at school, so I don't know. I can't remember the author right off the top of my head.
I'll look. Thank you.
Wanda, do you remember the question?
I think so.
Okay.
So As I stated in my introduction, I am not a classroom teacher. I am what you would call the administrator over curriculum and instruction. And so I'm always going to come at things in that lens. And so I always want people to know what it is we're talking about. And so I'm going to start us off with just that. So if I ask you a question, what is the first thing a professional in your field does when they look at this? I would like to hear your thoughts. If you are a historian, or if you're science or ELA or math, what is it a professional in that field does when they see this image? And I can't see you, so you can just open up.
For the history one, I always think of like the historical thinking skills, like the contextualization, periodization, causation, like all those things. I just start thinking about that when looking at a primary source to help how I'm going to analyze it.
So what questions would you ask about this
Let's
primary
see.
source?
Some of a question I would ask is, after reading this, if they can put this into the correct context, the time period, asking like what are some major events that they might know that's happening around this time period that would influence this primary source, things like that. Be depending on what the standard based thing is, but just also just helping maybe some scaffolds to help break down what the primary source is, like what do you think the author's purpose is, things like that, also to help them do this historical thinking skills. Thinking like a story.
Right.
I would ask them the source. Is it a legal document? Is it a newspaper? What do they think the author was of this, and who was the audience supposed to be?
What about the science image? What do we think about that?
From a math point of view, I would ask, what patterns are you noticing? What equation might model this relationship? What relationship does there seem to be between time and concentration?
So from a scientist perspective, I would ask, why is there a red dot outside of the rest of the dots? What does that mean? And why is there an outlier? All right, so when we talk about disciplinary literacy, when you're trying to plan for this, this is the question that you should ask yourself. What is it that professionals would be doing with this particular standard topic? What would they be doing? And so I'll move into, if I was in a science classroom, we would demo these 3 flasks. What do you notice about these 3 flasks?
They all look the same to me. That's what I noticed.
They all seem to be clear liquid.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And so the question is it water, acid, or sodium chloride solution? Well, a good scientist is going to ask questions and then plan to carry out an investigation. And you can see this is directly aligned with the South Carolina standards for science. The interesting thing about science is it's 3-pronged. It's unlike any other set of standards. You have to know the content, you have to know how the content connects to previously learned content, and then you have to know the science and engineering practices that would be used for the content. And so all of those things are going to exist in every standard. And so in this particular performance-based assessment, you would be asking questions and planning to carry out that investigation. And so in this particular example, I would ask my students for an interrogation plan. And this is not a new technique. This is what you're doing when you're getting interrogated. So you are treating each flask as if it's done something wrong. And so you generate a list of questions like, do you contain free ions? Will you change color if I use pH paper? Will you evaporate and leave behind a solid? Because what I'm trying to assess is, do they understand that if I need to find out if it's water, an acid, or a salt solution, how to technically differentiate that in a lab? And once they figure out, then they should be able to create a procedure in order to test and answer these questions. And so then you move into the CER, very similar to what you would do in social studies. The claim is going to be the what. So once they do the testing, the example would be the beaker 1 contains water. The evidence in science is going to be, how do you know that beaker 1 contains water? Well, I would be looking for, well, the pH paper remained the same color and the liquid did not contain any leftover solids after boiling. So if the pH paper doesn't change colors, it's neutral. If there was no liquid or solid left on the bottom of the beaker, it's not a solution, it's not a mixture or a solution. So it has to be pure water. Multiple concepts tied up into those questions. And then they have to give the reasons. Why does this matter? Well, based on the properties of compounds, acids have hydrogen ions and will cause the pH paper to turn a different color based on its pH. I also know that pure water boils at 100 degrees and this solution boiled at 98 degrees. So getting students to generate their own questions by interrogating, so pretending that whatever it is I'm trying to figure out is on trial. And then they would have to use their science concepts to come up with good questions. And from those questions, they design and conduct an investigation. So there's a lot of content there, but you will see a lot of information, like, do they know the difference between an acid and a base or a neutral? And you can figure those things out through the CER process. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Questions or comments for Wanda? Wanda, you did a great job of connecting it to the standards as well. Elka, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, the minute you engage students as detectives, they're on, because a detective doesn't give up until a detective has the answer. They have to go from this route doesn't work, then you try another and another, and that works for math, I think, too. If you let the students who has to get if I'm a detective, then if this didn't work, I'll try another thing. So it's a healthy, natural way to keep them inquisitive and going. So
I think one of the things that science teachers forget is that every science class you took in college, you had to take a lab. Like, it was a part of the class. You couldn't get a science degree without a 3-hour organic chemistry lab or a biology 102 lab. And I think they forget that is what scientists do. They are in the lab, they are investigating, and we don't see enough of that in the classroom. And I'm not sure why that's a thing. I wish there were some science teachers on that could tell me why we don't do some sort of lab investigation at least 2 to 3 days a week in a science class.
I love the student ownership component of them creating their own questions too, and you can really see the vocabulary and they're able to apply it to being able to solve the case. And the fact that CER was used and showed us how it's like cross curriculum, that you can use that framework and resource to really get some good disciplinary literacy out of the lesson that you had planned. So thank you for sharing. That was a great example.
As a linguist, I keep, it's always goes like zzz, in the back of my mind, so what's the language that has to go with it, that the kids have to own to orally engage and then do it in writing too. And so when that's provided too, then I think you get more kids to jump on board with taking a risk to make a claim and to follow through. And then they know there's some writing connected with it. And then they feel more confident, I guess, to put those aspects down in writing too. But if I can't speak it, if I can't say it, if I can't use the academic language, I'm not going to put it down in writing because it's too foreign to me. So it's not coming out. So it's one of the things I hit very hard. We need to get the kids talking about math or the social studies aspect or the science aspect. Keep talking, keeps using the vocabulary in sentence frames that if I have to provide them, sure, I'll provide them, but keep going, use it in the class with me. And then we can step into the writing at some point.
One of the things about science is one of the science and engineering practices is use a model. And really, you should be using a model every single day, especially for your language learners. And a lot of models in science, they're different. If I want to model water, I can do it multiple ways. I can say H2O. I can put together ball and stick figures and show that it is an angled or a bent shaped molecule. It's so many ways you can use a model so that our language learners see this is water, this is water, this is water. Now say water. It lends itself so well. There are so many ways to model a science concept.
It's great.
So Wanda was very clear with us about how disciplinary literacy folds into the standards that we are required to cover. In the other two subject areas, math and social studies, describe to us the strain in your standards that tell us that we need to focus on disciplinary literacy?
So, in mathematics, we have process standards, just like science has process standards, and our process standards do include those connecting representations, the translating between the mathematical language and the English language, the context. So, looking at things analytically and contextually. Communication and clear communication is part of that. So, all of those things are in those process standards. I feel like similar to what Wanda was just saying about science, that sometimes as math teachers, we get focused on the content of our standards and forget that those processes should be embedded in every single lesson, that students should be demonstrating their thinking through talking with each other about math, through writing about math, through reading mathematical problems and analyzing those problems and doing some error analysis. So I think that is definitely a key part of our standards and expected if you're in a standards-based math classroom.
Yeah, I think similar to for social studies and how disciplinary literacy fits. I do have like a little chart. This was made by our district. I think that is like really helpful and useful when seeing how social studies, how disciplinary literacy fits and how it fits in with their standards. Because a lot of misconceptions is that in social studies that you just are memorizing facts and dates, you're reading a lot of stuff, but it's more of reading comprehension. And instead of like actually thinking like a historian, a geographer, a political scientist, economist. And so these are just some things that I think can really help teachers break down why you're reading, what you do as you think about the reading, and then how you can discuss what you read, and then how we can communicate what we read. And so just kind of breaking that down in the lesson, making sure you have all those components, I think are really helpful, because our social studies lends itself very greatly to being able to incorporate these discipline literacy skills, like being inquiry based, analyzing primary and secondary sources. So just like um, Dr. Littlejohn and Dr. Rathburn were saying, I think one of the things that is missing sometimes is that discourse, that academic discourse of vocabulary, the talking component, a lot of the times, and also just being intentional about how we're doing the writing component as well when we're trying to assess those standards and what students are actually thinking and learning.
And we have a similar chart for math, so I'm going to show that too, since I didn't show it earlier, just so it's captured on the video.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think, also we have, with our multilingual learners, I noticed they're very shy to talk in math. And so something I've learned that helps is not to make it a whole group discussion, to let them share with their partner, and then do what's something great that your partner said, instead of requiring everyone to speak out loud, because sometimes they're a little nervous about choosing the right words, which goes back to maybe not still learning the language, being in that learner mode for the language, and being afraid that they're going to say the wrong words, or not quite knowing what words to say.
So I have a personal question. What kind of pushback do you get from the students to begin with, or their parents or administrators, on how is this going to help our test scores go up? And how do you handle that?
I want to speak on that in the reverse. Okay, this
Okay.
will help your standardized tests go up. And why are you not doing it? That's the administrative question. Okay.
Mhm.
And there's not a class that prepares you for this, unless, at least for my generation of educators. I never took a class on disciplinary literacy. And as far as like the new standards that have come out in the 2020 era, all of them require you to know disciplinary literacy. And so it's, from the administrator's perspective, you know, it's something that you have to constantly ask questions again, like, how does this apply to what a real social studies or historian would be doing? You have to keep coaching and having that discussion. And when you go in and you observe a classroom, you have to ask the question, how are the students making the connection to what a person in this field would really be doing? And to get the teacher to process that and to think about that. Because all of the standards require some sense of literacy, knowledge, and ability. And I think that
Mhm.
our scores would go up tremendously if every day they were exposed to it in every content.
Right. Their
I,
overall general knowledge is improved, so that they can think about what the questions are asking them then on these multiple choice tests, and they can
Mhm.
put together the right answer instead of memorize the right answer.
Yep.
I also think though too, like you were bringing that, Ms. Carlson, how you were bringing that up with the, this voting, learning about voting, that is for your life. So when I do math tasks, I find it always harder. What of this math skill that I'm learning here, how does that relate to my life when I walk out of the school or when I get older? What am I what is it that we're processing or practicing that I can take into my life outside the school? When you bring that up in a more concrete way, or even bring sometimes maybe a person in who's in a particular job where that kind of math is needed, it might make it more, it might jolt the students into like, hey, I need to look at it from that perspective, not just to get through the test or through the exam. Like throwing like fishing rods out for long-term benefits of this rather abstract processing that we have to do. And I don't know, Dr. Rathburn, if you have anything specific to say about that, but or anyone else, but I feel that that would have helped me to be a little more together with math if somebody told me like, hey, you need this for this or this.
So I think the unfortunate thing for me is sometimes the things that I teach because of the standards, the applications are far beyond where we are at that moment in our math careers. And I say that to the students when they ask that question. I say, I know we don't see this direct application yet, but eventually this is going to lead us to do this. And sometimes we do projects. We last year in Algebra 2, we created food truck designs to learn about linear programming, and they all designed their own food truck and menus and created the equations to be able to make sure they were making a profit based on the cost for their menus. We designed and built roller coasters for polynomial graphs. So we do some of those things sometimes. There was something else I was thinking about when Wanda was talking about the talk. Oh, I was going to say my students would probably tell you that my favorite thing to say is you don't learn math by watching someone else do math. And so to me, that's what the disciplinary literacy is about. It's about engaging in the math, talking about the math, because that's how we learn math. We don't learn math by watching someone else do math. No one does. And that's what disciplinary literacy is about to me in math. But yeah, the applications and helping them see where that's going to be, it really does help them understand a purpose for what we're learning instead of just being equations all the time.
I think it's also important for science teachers, just say, you don't expect your students to be scientists. Like, we all went to school to major in whatever it was that we loved, but you don't expect your kids to do the same. They might, but one of the things that a teacher that is teaching science could do is ground the day in a science and engineering practice. Today, we're going to learn how to ask questions. Today, we're going to learn how to use a model. Today, we're going to learn how to plan and conduct an investigation. And so they connect to the skill, which is transferable, instead of, oh, we're going to learn about balancing equations today. Nobody's going to ever balance an equation if you're at the grocery store. You're not doing that. So the skill, though, I think that would make the connection, especially if you're teaching science.
Additional questions or comments? This has been an amazing time of learning from each other. It just shows what educators can do when they come together and put each other's ideas out in front of ourselves and build on them.
I just so appreciate how you each phrased your points. I just love hearing those different ways how you sell your points, and it's just, it feels good. It's not my language, but it's refreshing to hear the different perspectives. And maybe I'd come to your math class.
Yes.
Interesting. I
come anytime.
Yeah, that would be, it's it's true, Charlene, what you're saying. It's beautiful to have that moment to share, to learn from all of you and each other. So it's refreshing. Thank you.
Just real quickly, back to, you know, how math makes my brain collapse. One of the things that I always, when I'm teaching disciplinary literacy, I always try to find memes or images to start the class that are funny, right? And so one of the ones that I had that I just loved, because it's like, it even made sense to me. And it says, you don't think you're using math? And then it shows how somebody is walking diagonally through a field versus walking around it, right? So you have already figured out that going that way is going to get you shorter. That's math, right? So
That's right.
you know, showing them that, yeah, you are using these skills. You're just not aware that you are, right? So when you're, you know, when you're pouring yourself a pop and your sister a pop, and you're making sure all of those things are exactly the same, right? That's math, because you're figuring out quantity, and you're looking at, you know, mass or whatever. I know it's math. I just know it's math. So, you know, giving them those examples so that they see that, I think sometimes is like, oh, this isn't as intimidating as I thought, right? Except for statistics. I'm never giving up on that one. It was hard, but
It was hard.
It's the most fun math.
Yeah, well.
Oh, I
yeah.
think so too.
Well,
I told my math statistics tutees that I can say I weigh 130 pounds, give or take 20, and I'm telling the truth. You know, you can make them believe anything.
Well, my goal
our time is drawing to. Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
I was just gonna say, my goal this summer is to go back through and just start with Khan Academy, because they granimalize it for me until I can figure it out, because I am capable of learning. I just, like, for whatever reason, I cannot get that to stay in my head. Like, I know, like, p-values and that. I mean, I know, like, we want 0.05, but so my goal is, I've got data from when I did my dissertation that I'm going to just, you know, step by step, and I'm going to run it through SPSS. So, because I know where that data came from. And then when the results come out, then I'll be able to interpret it, because I know what it means. Whereas, you know, when we did our activities in class, they were just abstractions. But I know what, like, this column meant, and I know what they started, and here, okay, that's what that means. So that's my goal. Why? Because I'm a masochist. Could just go to the discussion section and be done, but no, I'm gonna figure it out.
Well, I'm going to close this up. I just want to remind you of 2 opportunities for you. On our Facebook page, we have an award for teachers. It's the Inclusive Literacy, Heather Hall Inclusive Literacy Award that you can nominate someone for. Heather was on our board, and she died suddenly last fall, and we came to this as a way of honoring her. We also have a form out there. If you're interested in being a part of literacy and discipline, we would love to have you. You're knowledgeable, you're interested, you want to learn more, and you want to share more. Those are kind of the underlying characteristics that we look for in these leadership positions in our organization, where you can share with others and bring your expertise. So I'd like to encourage you to go to our Facebook page and seriously think about either of those opportunities. Wanda dropped in the chat line an opportunity for professional development, and you just have to go to the form and fill out, and you'll be able to print your certificate. Wanda, am I leaving out anything that we need to put before the fine people that joined us tonight? It's just been such a pleasure.
It was an honor to be alongside 2 of my colleagues. And so I thank you for that opportunity.
Good.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
And right, and watch for us for month-to-month webinars. We have another exciting one scheduled for, I know we have something coming up in June. We're still working on May, but you can always find us on our Facebook page. Any other comments or questions for us? Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you for letting me
Thank
play
you.
with y'all.
Thanks for coming.